Welcome to the Book Bungalow. This event with Kendra Greene this afternoon is part of the 24th Annual Utah Humanities Book Festival. This annual free festival is the Utah Humanities gift to the community, allowing us to explore all sorts of ideas by interacting with great writers. And believe me, Kendra's a great writer. The complete program's available at www.utahhumanities.org. Our thanks to the Book Festival's major sponsors, George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation, Salt Lake City Arts Council, Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks Fund, Summit County RAP, Weber County RAMP, the Charles Redd Center for Western Studies, the King's English Bookshop, Weller Bookworks, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Catalyst. Also, we acknowledge that the Book Bungalow resides on the original territory once inhabited by the ancestral Puebloans and the Fremont Indigenous people. Today, southwestern Utah is primarily home to the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe and the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah, a confederation of 5 bands: Cedar, Indian Peaks, Kanash, Kusharam, and Shivwits. Tribes that have been living, working, and residing on this land from time immemorial. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this land, and we honor and respect the indigenous peoples still connected to the land on which we gather. Please, let's take a moment of silence to think about and pay respect to the indigenous peoples, both past and present. Through the end of October, the Book Bungalow is continuing to offer a variety of author events and even a writing workshop by Kendra tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. our time as part of the book festival. We invite you to take a look at our schedule on our website and register now if you want to attend a remaining event, whether it's live or virtual. I think we've got a couple of live events next week, 3 live events, and then we have a virtual event to end. But I'll be posting our website link in the chat room, along with a link to order Kendra's book, another link to sign up for her writing workshop, we hope you will, and yet another link to a book festival audience survey. Please take a moment after, when you get the link, to complete the survey after the event for an opportunity to win a $10 gift card to the King's English in Salt Lake City. And I'm going to talk to them next year about getting us in on that, so you can get a gift card to our store. Finally, at the conclusion of Kendra's conversation with me, I'm sure she'll be happy to answer questions from any of you, so feel free to pose them in the chat box. Mythic creatures, natural wonders, and the mysterious human impulse to collect are on beguiling display in this poetic tribute to the museums of an otherworldly island nation. Iceland is home to only 330,000 people. And it was a time when Salt Lake City was about that big, or I don't know what the population right now is, but more than yet this island nation with only that number, and then it all fits in one phone book too. They have more than 265 museums and public collections, ranging from the intensely physical, like the Icelandic Phallological Museum, which collects the penises of every mammal known to exist in Iceland, to the vaporously metaphysical, like the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft, which poses a particularly Icelandic problem. How do you display what can't be seen? In the Museum of Whales You Will Never See, A. Kendra Greene is our wise and whimsical guide through this cabinet of curiosities, showing us in dreamlike anecdotes and more than 30 charming illustrations how a seemingly random assortment of objects, a stuffed whooper swan, a rubber boot, a shard of obsidian, a chastity belt for rams, can map a people's past and future, their fears and obsessions. The world is chock-a-block with untold wonders, she writes, there for the taking, ready to be uncovered at any moment, if only we keep our eyes open. A. Kendra Greene is an essayist, printer, and maker of artists' books. She writes about collections and records radio essays and spends not enough time locking up wood type on a Vandercook proof press. That's a tongue twister. I'd like to see that 10 times. Vandercook proof press.
Oh, you should see what happens when I list Ziziva as one of my recent publications.
That sounds like a town in Utah. No, seriously, we have a town that starts with ZZ something or other. Anyway, she began her museum career adhering text to the wall, one trembling vinyl letter at a time. From there, she went on to manage a collection of photography, costume a giant ground sloth, and keeps returning as a visiting artist at the Nasher Sculpture Center. Her work as an essayist started during a Fulbright to teach English in South Korea, and she earned an MFA in nonfiction writing from the University of Iowa and a graduate certificate from the University of Iowa Center for the Book under the auspices of a Jacob J. Javits Fellowship. She's associate editor of prose at the Southwest Review and lately a fellow at Harvard University's Library Innovation Lab. Not surprised by that. She makes books and broadsides under the imprint Greene Ink Press and occasionally Red Thread Press, while posters are done under the name Miniature Giraffe Press. You're an awfully busy person. I have to say. Maybe I should just cut short. I'm going to send you to her website also when I can. And if not in the chat link, chat box, then in my follow-up email. Anyway, I just want to introduce her to you, and I will be sending a follow-up email with the link to our website, the link to order her book, the link to the audience survey I talked about, and the link to Kendra's website, so you can learn more about her. Let's just dive into this. First of all, were you involved in the designing of this book, since you're into that?
You're so nice to ask. Yeah, John Siciliano is my editor. He spends most of his time with translation, and he's one of the two editors of Penguin Classics. So I'm not exactly the sort of book he normally takes on, but I knew it was going to be right in our first conversation when he said, "Do you have thoughts on trim size?" I did. Yeah, so it is very purposefully a book that is right, a little taller and a little narrower. Right, we wanted it to be a thing that you could hold and carry, right, that you could travel with. And I don't know, sort of prim, right? It's got good posture. It's a little Victorian in many of its sensibilities. And the fact that it needed to be a beautiful object was a thing that we just knew from the beginning. So, right, for a book that is so much about objects and their stories, we had to put it in something that you'd want to hold on to.
Yes. Is there a museum of books?
There are a number of author houses. So there's that. There's a poetry center just down the street from the award-winning Herring Era Museum in Siglufjordur that endeavors to hold a copy of every book of poetry ever published in the Icelandic language. But for museums of books per se, right, there's the new, Museum of Writing and the Writer in Chicago.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Okay, that just popped into my head. Well, let's dive into this. First of all, can you talk a bit about these two? Well, humans have many urges, but there's these two urges that kind of combine here. The one to create and tell stories, and then you've got the urge to collect things. And how are they talk about their connection.
Mm. Right. So, right, I'm a tactile person, and having spent a lot of time working in museums, I know very much what it is to encounter the thing, not just even that you want to touch, right? The thing that you want to put in your mouth, that like there's just a way that you need to know it. I haven't done it. I can tell you later about an old colleague of mine who invented the knuckle touch so that you weren't risking the oil and dirt of the fingertips, but would still know the roughness of the paint. But right, we like things, right? We are acquisitive, right? We pick up the stones that are beautiful from the ground. We know to do that. And we also love stories, right? We were made by stories. We understand the world through stories. And I think ultimately museums, right, just fundamentally, they're storytelling institutions. They aren't warehouses of stuff. The stuff is all there as an occasion to get to tell some other story. And the number of stories you could tell is various. I think about the Aristotelian causes diagrammed on the board when I was a philosophy major, that there is, right, how the thing was made, who kept it, what it was for, the fact that we can even hold on to it. For decades, I haven't been able to get over the feeling walking through a museum of a particular thing that we can still exist. In the Dallas Museum of Art, there's this tapestry that is blue feathers and yellow feathers. And it is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. And the colors are still sharp and bright. The fact that this thing has been able to move in the Americas to arrive here where it can be protected, I mean, that it survived at all, just astonishes me. So there's always that story, that anything ever did come to exist and that we can hold on to it. And of course, all the other stories about what it has meant to the hands it has passed through.
Yeah. Now, when you went to Iceland, did you take more than one trip there, or was this all on one trip?
Well, the first trip in 2011, I had managed to secure a graduate travel grant that I met the grantors later, and they felt very sorry for this graduate student that couldn't spell. They weren't sure what philological right, right, was then I go study knowledge or stamps. But I was going to spend 2 weeks sitting at the Icelandic Phallological Museum, and then 2 weeks looking at the rest of the country to put it in context. And in the museum itself, I'd gone because a friend had pointed it out to me, and I pretty much got one internet click into it, and then I had to pick a language. And of the 7 options in which you can view the Icelandic Phallological Museum website, one of them is Esperanto. And I knew then that there was something about language. And it's a place that gets written up all the time, right around the world. Journalists who are traveling through love to send home a story to the hometown paper about this place that is weird, kooky, oddball, strange, sadistic. And it just isn't if you are a museum person. By museum standards, this is participating in some of the oldest, finest, most core museum traditions we have, right? The amateur naturalist, the individual collector, these are old things, right? The cabinet of curiosities, even I think the Athenaeum, right? In the way that it looks like one person makes these collections, but if you push on them hardly at all, you'll see how there's a whole community, right? Certainly a family behind them that is helping aggregate and draw attention and create the thing that is.
So when you were on the website, I guess English was not an option?
It was one of the 7 options.
Okay, all right. But when you went to Iceland, how much Icelandic did you pick up?
I think hospitality level is how we talk about these things. Declensions are very difficult for me. It is a struggle, and it's a place where the chances of having an Icelander who would prefer to speak to you in a language you speak well are pretty high.
Okay.
I think I've been 7 times since the first trip in 2011. And I think each time my sense of what the language barrier is shifts a little. If you had met me in 2011, I would have said, I met 2 people in a month that didn't speak English. One was a child who hadn't started kindergarten, and the other was a woman on a farm who was very, very old. But of course, there's so much more gradation than that, how much language moves in which direction. It's a country that is trying so hard and conscientiously with whole ministries set up to make sure that Icelandic isn't lost, There are 600,000 speakers of it in the world.
Wow.
And even if you have a ministry that repurposes old Icelandic words to talk about new things that are coming into the culture, such that they say the SMS phone, so we're at a certain era of cell phone, when you have it on vibrate, it goes, and there's an archaic word for a young sheep that slipped right into the language. They're really beautiful portmanteaus in their way. The television becomes an oracle box.
That's funny.
Yeah, so it's a place where they're definitely trying to hold on to the Icelandic, and to be introducing to be working in English is a thing to think about. But I will say I've become really, really grateful for the people that ask for a translator. Almost never do we really need one. But if you ask someone to come sit and join the table, because we're almost always at a table, the cafe table in the museum, the kitchen table at someone's home. And you have one more person who slows down the conversation and brings one more set of memories to, yeah, but you didn't tell her about it was 82, not 83. The having to bridge a language is really helpful to remember the ways that we always had to bridge language, even when we thought we were speaking the same one.
That's true. That's true. So why do you suppose this urge to collect things is so prevalent in Iceland?
Well, I think it might just be more on display in Iceland, It's had a chance to flourish.
To display things.
Well, I mean, the old math teacher in me wants to point out, it's a small sample size. They skew towards superlative in a hurry. But I think there are a few things that are at play. I think you have a very isolated place, You've got an island that is very poor for a very long time. So their relationship with things, I think, is sort of heightened and shaped in particular. The importance of preservation, If you're going to make it, if you live in a place that only has 2 seasons, you don't bother to describe the transitional spring and fall. If you need to make it through that much winter, if you are the town in Iceland that does not see the sun until February 24th, you know about preservation. And I think you also start to have this relationship between what is and what can be seen that's really useful to navigating museums, If you live in a place that goes dark for long periods of time, that has the stone cairns set up so that you can navigate through mists that could send you to your death because you would lose total sense of where anything was.
Wow. Have you gone in that time?
Yeah. Oh, it can happen any time of year. Yeah, they blow through. When you see it on a clear day, they look pretty close together. The Sorcery Museum talks about one of the regional Stranger sorcerers who's famous for calling up a mist and being able to disappear because of course you could, no one could track you. I remember one summer I went for 2 months, and it was 2 weeks before I saw the sun in June, that there was daylight, but the actual breaking of the cloud cover never, didn't happen for a long time. It's a very marine place. Almost everything is built along the coast.
Yeah.
So if you're used to that things are there even when you can't see them, it makes sense that you talk about the hidden people. And even now, construction projects get delayed and rerouted so as not to offend them, And then if you were channeling a lot of your cultural productivity, you don't have the metal or the clay of sort of traditional cultural production. And anyway, you didn't have enough stuff to burn to get those hot enough to be workable. You have a lot of space to channel creative input into language, right? You have a deeply literate, very early literate nation that has the sagas to give us, has poetry, has forms that you specifically to sing from one shepherd to another across a valley.
Wow.
So if you're storytellers, I think at the end of the day, you end up with museums. And it doesn't hurt if until kind of recently, within the last 10 years, if your tour season has sort of a hard start and stop that makes it 3 months, if you're committing to 3 months of a museum, there might be a lot of things you could do if you only had to do it for a quarter of the year.
I wondered if I love the divisions in your book. You have cabinets and you have galleries and you have museums. Can you explain how you chose which kinds of things to put in those sections? Like what constituted a cabinet?
So the book has 7 very long essays and 8 very short essays, and they alternate one than the next. And when I was writing it, I was thinking about these big, right, the what are called the galleries. They're bigger, they're sort of more traditional. They carried the weight. I thought of them as installing the pillars of a temple, that something bigger would be held up by them, but that each one was sort of complete and monumental into itself. And then these cabinets that could pick up things that didn't need as long of a treatment, that were more ephemeral, harder to pin down, that were often just a story that I loved and needed to include, needed to find a place to pack in. And I thought that they would, I don't know, sort of be a palate cleanser as you moved through the book, that you would have these sustained efforts and then get a little reward, which I hope still happens. But once I actually laid them out, right, I'd written a bunch and found which ones needed to go in their order. And then they looked sort of, it was like I'd added a minor key, that so much of the galleries is about what exists. And the cabinets, I think, have a lot to do with what slips through your fingers, right? What you lose.
Well, I always like that origin, not the origin. I wondered about that first story with the fur coat and the mumbling man. And you seem to get so much. I wondered if you felt tempted as a writer. Have you ever written a novel? It seemed like it would make for a great novel in some way.
I hope someone writes it.
Oh, you're not going to. Okay.
And all due respect, I love a world builder, and I think it would set up a lot of research that would be delightful to do. But I'm just agog at things that are true. Mm-hmm. That I don't find I need to stray too much farther than that.
Okay. All right. Well, I want you to, for those who have not read the book, I love the origin story of the Phallological Museum. If you could briefly share how it all came to be, how a gift to a headmaster grew into a museum, I would love it.
Yes. So I think of Icelanders sort of like I think of New Yorkers. You don't meet them and find out that they have one job, right? You are an actor / waiter, except in Iceland, right? You were a banker, but you have your rock band, right? You are a school teacher and have this fiber arts thing going. So the phrase of the Icelanders is, "We are so few." So you end up on the volunteer rescue squad, and in this case, you could be a school teacher during the school year, and in the summer, go work at the whaling station down the way. And it turns out there is one part of the whale they don't need. Coincidentally, maybe you remember your Melville, the one part of the whale that you can tan into leather because it isn't as oily as the rest of the skin. Which means there is not even the entire whale penis, because you were taking just what is available outside of the body in death when the retractor muscles release their grip. And no one needs it. You're free if you are willing to cart it away, to put it in a garbage bag and leave it on your boss's desk. Which, I mean, if you could. You might. And no one would forget about it. So people would continue to bring you things, right? The teachers in the beginning claimed that they knew there was this whip. Shakespeare writes about it, the pizzle made from a dried bull's penis. And in reference to that, they brought in the whale penis. And, somebody thinks you like a thing, right? Your office finds out you're into frogs. You're going to get frog figurines for a while. And right, once you start having things, and critically, once you have some friends, right, you and your drinking buddies can sort all of this at the bar, the hypothetical museum, right? You can give it a name, you can imagine its architecture. And once you imagine a thing, even if you don't think it's a thing that can exist, it's got a foothold, and it makes it that much more likely it comes into being.
That's true. Now, I know you quoted your friend's opinion in the book about what is the difference between a collection and a museum. Did you agree with that, or what do you think makes the difference? What's the difference between a collection and a museum?
Yeah, my landscape historian friend, I don't think is wrong about sort of organization being important. A lot of museum professionals I know put the preservation as sort of key. The idea of a museum without things makes me absolutely giddy, right? The pure, nimble storytelling museum. What would you do if you didn't have to put all of your resources into trying to stop entropy? But museum professionals tell me this is a terrible idea. If you don't have a thing, if you aren't chained to it, right? If you aren't in that caretaking, you don't have perpetual responsibility, you're out of luck. I think part of what's interesting in Iceland is that the language makes no distinction, right? In my first visit to Iceland, I thought, how are there all these museums, right? I went to 20 in 2 weeks, and almost all of them had been open since 1995 at the earliest, 2000 more likely. Just a lot of them really suddenly. And I'd returned for a second trip to sort of see if maybe there was more than one essay in all this, when somebody finally helped me enough with the language to see that it's one word, collection or museum. You see it in the Icelandic word for library, bókasafn, right? I was like, a book library, that's quaint. But it's not, right? It's very literal. It is a collection of books. So I don't know, I take sort of a broad view. I think in some ways the museum is a question of how you're navigating the public and the private. And one of the things that's special about Iceland is this just almost lack of border, the ease with which you move from things that are private to people coming by until it isn't exactly anymore.
Which leads to my next question. It's funny because the thing that independent bookstores like mine kind of pride ourselves on or try to do is to curate our collection of books. What's the difference then? How do you cross over from hoarding to curating?
Good luck to you. Hopefully you start early. I am on an archivist listserv, and they are as charming and occasionally cranky as you can imagine. And people that land with a thing that has never been gone through, and they know they've got 20 years of work ahead of them, but don't know if they have 20 years worth of funding. I think curating is about care. The Phallological Museum's daughter, the Icelandic noir novelist Lilja Sigurdardóttir, this is netted now in English, talks about how...
Is she the one that's the writer?
Yes. So she talks about how she holds on to things, but she isn't like her dad. She doesn't want to know as much as she can about where it was from and when it was. She has never thought to make a little slip of paper, and that's a thing that he does. So I think curating is an art of context, and that's sort of what that's one of those dividing points between a mass of stuff and a collection.
Has he ever gotten things contributed to him that he just thought, no, I'm not putting this in the museum?
Yes, you can imagine that once the museum existed, people from around the world mail him things, and some of it comes in, right? There were some Icelanders who saw an elephant in Africa. What do you know? But he assures me, and I don't want to know anymore, that there are things too distasteful for them to display.
Okay. Okay. Now, you said in the book that you felt museums are born of novelty.
Mm.
Can you expand a bit about on that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, partly I think there are, again, sort of two things that we love, right? We like affirmation and confirmation. We like a witness. We like a name for a thing that we know, right? We like to belong. We like to be part of a tribe, right? We like repetition. But we also love the other thing, right? We love novelty. We love shock and surprise and a thing that causes us to understand the world differently, that just knocks us over. And museums, for a thing that can look in our sort of current understanding potentially as, I don't know, institutional and rigid, maybe even stodgy, they aren't doing that first thing. They're born of the, can you believe it? Every time, right? The thing that either because it is so individual and unique, right? The one specimen, or the look at the thing that you know because we can show you 200 moccasins or 500 butterflies or, right, any number of things.
Okay, I want to know what your favorite 3 museums were.
Am I limited to Iceland? Yes, I assume.
Yes,
Good.
and then I'll ask you for your favorite outside Iceland or something.
Yeah, well, I feel like, I mean, it's like asking my favorite children. They'll hear. There's no picking. I love them all for different
They're
reasons.
not going to hear this. I have 12 followers on my YouTube channel. I don't think this is going to get to Iceland. But it's up to you.
Yeah, well, I'll say favorite in sort of why, right? There's a place that in translation comes through as museum, the Museum of Prophecy. It's not in the book. I couldn't find a way to sort it out. I love that such a thing is even conceivable. And then I love that it is the story of one of the only named women in the sagas, that she's a local resident. It is essentially Thordis's museum, and the history of this powerful woman that lived alone and had her own money until the townspeople decided she really needed to get married and found a man who was known for saying yes to everything. So when they suggested that he ought to propose, what could he do? And then, right, they go into have a partnership where he's kind of a minor character. But I love this little museum that's run by 2 women that thought this story needed to be more broadly heard, who will still read your palm or your not tea leaves but coffee grounds, who will do your tarot reading or do the runes, as they also have the simulacrum sheep's gut to explain to you how you would. It's amazing. I forget which end you start from in the gut to read how the winter is going to go. And I forget whether the clumps of digested material is a good sign or a bad sign. I assume a good sign, but that you can read the months in this snake of lumps and lean periods. So that's on the list.
And how important were the persons who were running the museum to the fact that you were so favorably impressed with these places?
It's a really good question. These places are so new. Even the Skólar Museum, which is the second oldest museum in Iceland, the original curator turned 100 in April, still lives in this town. Not town, I've been corrected. You need 60 people to be a town, and they don't have 60 people. In this hamlet in Iceland, it translates as a someplace. the Trithibli of Iceland, the original curator of the second oldest museum in Iceland, the biggest museum outside of Reykjavik, still lives next door. He retired like 5 years ago and wasn't ready. He was kind of pushed out. That throughout we see that we are on a precipice. The book is dedicated to the sorcerer of the Museum of Sorcery and Witchcraft, who once spent days with me, right? Drove me out to see petrified trolls. And then when I went back with the manuscript for a final fact checking, the staff had to tell me that he was gone.
Oh.
Right. Petra, the stone collector, was alive the first time I set foot in Iceland, but wouldn't have been available to talk. That we are moving through this transition of what a thing is when a founder makes it and what happens after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in the case of the Phallological Museum, he's passing it on to his son. Right?
Yes, it's now in, it reopened this summer in a new location. They now have a cafe, you'll be glad to know. And yeah, in August, celebrated his 80th birthday.
I want to open it up. Well, before I do, I want you to talk a little bit about the topic of your writing workshop tomorrow, in case anyone here might want to sign up for it. What are you going to cover and who would benefit from it the most?
So we'll start with some background. In talking about the book, I was visiting a friend's class, and they have a policy of this sort of check-in question, and it changes every time, but in honor of me visiting, they were asking about your first museum memories. And no one had ever asked me this before. What was the first museum I could remember or remember caring about? And it startled me with what a good question it is, that it gets so much to, right, when did you know something? When were you aware of something? What are things that you care about, right? It's an awakening question that also gets you, right, place and people, and it moves in so many directions. So I want us tomorrow to be thinking about those museum memories and the directions that those can spark, right? How those are prompts unto themselves, and the related question of how objects move out into story in a hurry. With a little pointing to and touching on things like the Significant Objects Project. Mary Ruffel is hanging out here.
You know, you talk about the Significant Objects Project. What is it?
It's a couple of economists who were thinking about value and story, and they bought things. They set a price limit. I think it's $5, $10. There was a limit for how much they could pay for something at a thrift store. And then they recruited writers to write the eBay description and sign it. And so, right, the economists had a lot of fun with the graphing of how value changed. You will not be surprised that everything went for more money once it had a good story, significantly more money in some case, and it didn't track to how famous the authors were. Right, they did a bunch of controls, they worked the numbers.
It was the story.
It was the story, and they set up a framework for different kinds of stories. So when is the object a totem, right? When does the object function in different ways? And we're breaking down sort of how story works and object and the way that things become meaningful, right? And hence valuable.
Okay, let me open it up. We have 10 or so minutes. If you have any questions you want to ask Kendra, please put them in the chat. Or there's only, how many of us are here? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, if you want to make a statement, if you aren't really an interrogative sort of person, we have space for that.
They're thinking.
Mm-hmm. 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 I know, you're all so brave.
What was her first museum?
I hear you in the back.
That's her husband, I think.
Kendra, it's your daddy saying, what was your first museum? memory?
I'm pretty sure it's, and again, I take a broad view of museum, but the La Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles has this sculpture of, I think it's a mammoth, not a mastodon. I think they're woolly mammoths. And there's a mama and a baby, and one of them is getting sucked into the tar and the other one has to look on. And it made an impression. It's a very emotional scene. But I also remember, like as a kid, seeing it and thinking, this is someone picked this moment. Right? We don't know. They were under no obligation. It didn't have to look like this. They chose to make me feel this way by what they showed me.
Mm. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've never been back. I assume it's still heart-wrenching.
I haven't been there.
I want to know why Iceland. I mean, you had some funding to go there, but how did you become interested in Iceland, and then particularly the museums of Iceland?
I have met a lot of people who had the good sense to be interested in Iceland long before it ever crossed my mind. When I booked the ticket, I had two friends that were like, what are those dates again? We'll meet you out there. Other people knew this. It was really luck of the draw. I knew there was a $2,000 travel grant to leave the country for at least a month. And I'd been really lucky and really shaped by time that I'd spent in Chile, in Greece and Turkey, in Korea. And I thought I needed to go somewhere and just had to figure out where, and couldn't do it, right? I think if I asked you right now to spend the next 2 minutes drafting a proposal to leave this place, you could do it. But I couldn't. I was running out of time to apply for it. And a friend, the writer Lena Ferreira, whose Don't Come Back, you might want to know about. I was complaining about this to her one night. When I got home, she'd emailed me, I think the first Google search result on museums of the world, because I'd arrived at grad school from managing a museum collection and had been writing about this strangeness of a place that is all about story and tries to be amnesiac about its own, right? Doesn't hold on to them. There's no process for it. And it's a public facing thing, right? I mean, the whole projects of museums, let's be honest, is ridiculous. It is quixotic. You want to hold on to something for a long time, probably something that wasn't designed to last in the first place. Good luck to you, right? Weird things are going to happen with the chemistry and the culture. And then you open it up to the people, right? The way that people want to touch things and do. The fact that you can throw up in a museum on the artwork, not everyone knows that happens. So I was thinking about, right, the ways that we aren't telling the real humanity, right, the tenderness of a museum that's trying to do a thing that ultimately is going to fail. So I was already thinking about museums, and this list, we should all be proud that a few of the list, the museums on it, the 10 wackiest museums in the world, are domestic. Look at us, go USA.
What's the wackiest one here in the United States?
It's not that wacky. I feel like the Spam Museum was on there. We have nothing on Japanese toilet museums or the Japanese Museum of Hair, I suspect. But I saw the Icelandic Museum and I'd met exactly one Icelander in my life. And when Gardar and I were smoothing out the IKEA diagrams to install cabinets for my sister, I confessed to Gardar I knew nothing about Iceland. And that seemed sort of shabby of me. And the only thing Gardar chose to tell me, mind you, a country where 1 in 10 people will publish a book in their lifetime. We could go on with Iceland fun facts. It's a hobby of mine now. The only thing he told me was, we have a penis museum, the only one in the world. Which is only enough to make me click on the link. And then when I realized, and of course it is, right? The Phallological Museum really, more than it is about anything else, it's a museum of language, right? It is the expectation of what you have assumed it must be, and the fact that it is exactly what it says on the tin. And you have to sit with the fact that that isn't what you thought. And right, there were two parts to that question, maybe, and I forgot part of it. Keep me honest if I did.
Did she answer it fully, Susan?
That was good, but the whole idea of museums and this quest to visit museums and find museums, are you still on that quest?
Ooh, I feel like I haven't been going anywhere for a while, but yeah, I'm thinking about collections, maybe more broadly. So not just museums, but libraries and archives, and specifically the dangerous things that we hold on to, both literally, I mean, stuff explodes all the time, but more to the point, right, ideologically, the way that we create or restrict access, and the way in which we trust that it's important to hold on to things, especially things we know will hurt us, because it's much more dangerous to let go of them or forget them or deny that they exist.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you about what you are working on now. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, there's, I feel like the Icelandic book sort of bridges nicely into both the poison cabinet of dangerous things and a bestiary of conceptual encounters incarnate. Stay with me. Hopefully by the time this is a book, it'll have a subtitle that'll actually make people interested. Most people, that's nice. But I think they're, right, if one is moving towards, right, ideas and things in one sort of way, this is about how we pull ideas through things, the way that we understand a lot of things that we can't
Touch.
we make the immaterial material. We do that through naming, through language, through identity, so that the devil has introduced himself to me twice.
Don't leave us there.
Yeah.
I mean, he was really nice at the bookstore. The devil believes in buying local, paid in cash. And the other time, I was walking down a dirt road in Argentina, and he was off duty and had his devil suit in a bag. Would you like to see what's in the bag? To be honest, I didn't. A stranger asks, guess what's in my bag? I didn't want to say yes, but it turns out the answer was, this colorful cloth and all these little mirrors. It was like opening up a circus tent, my devil costume. But you only need to wear your devil's costume while you're in town.
And then you pack it up.
Yeah, the devil is off duty. I mean, it looks like hard work. I don't know.
Tell me about your experiences in Turkey.
Ooh, so I was
lived in Turkey when I was little.
I
know overseas, but
well, Merhaba. The thing that I think of first when I think of Turkey is one of the 7 wonders of the world, the temple to Artemisia, that was just a column in a pond with turtles on it. It's also home to the Underwater Museum of Archaeology tagline, "The museum isn't underwater, but the collection is from there."
oh,
So yeah, as part of my studying ancient Greece, eventually you end up in Turkey.
that's true. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to say hello, Kendra. I'm Emily. For everyone, I am doing an author interview with Kendra about this book, and so have corresponded with her a bit. And this is the first time I've seen her face to face, if virtually. So I just wanted to say hello. And also, are these your parents who are with us?
Over there in my corner, yes.
Oh my gosh, hello.
Yes, the Warren of, if I was an Icelander, I'd be a Warren's daughter.
Okay. It's so lovely to meet you all too. I love that this is a family affair.
Kendra, you should share how the phone book is arranged in Iceland.
Mhm. By first name, which has a lot to do with the fact that it's a patronymic last name system. So traditionally, your father's name and then son or daughter, depending on how you are identified at birth. But there are moments, sometimes it's a mother's name where people make a point of taking their mother's name instead of their father's. And forgive me that I've forgotten the actual word to hand you, but there's a pun, particularly post-war during the American occupation, or after the big wave of American occupation. It was not uncommon for there to be Icelandic children born whose fathers were not there. And there's a particular last name that is both, right, a man's name, son, but the name, right, it's sort of like Nilsson. So it's a play on there is no father, or right, they're son of no one.
Yeah.
So right, so siblings will have different names if they are sons or daughters. Generations will switch, although you sometimes meet Jon Jonssons. Really, they weren't going to let go of that one. So it makes a certain amount of sense to put everyone in the phone book by first name, but it also really drives home the point that there just aren't that many people you have to keep track of. It all fits in one phone book. You can call the prime minister if you want to. She's still in there.
But it must drive genealogists kind of crazy.
Well, I don't know. The Icelanders are second to the Mormons. I don't know. It was once explained to me that it's not that we're so few and you don't want to marry a cousin. It's that the only thing that survives are the sheep, right? That is the thing you can raise. That is your livestock. The only crop you can grow is to feed your sheep. So you get really good at husbandry, right? Your record keeping, your genealogy. There is an Icelandic genealogical app that is cross-purposed to check to see if the person that you met at the bar is a person you should keep seeing.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, this has been delightful. Thanks so much for spending time with us, Kendra. And
Oh, my, thank you.
And thanks to those who joined us. Remember, if you want a copy of the Museum of Whales You'll Never See, and I didn't put anything in the chat box because I was enjoying the conversation too much.
You're sending an email later.
I am sending an email with all of that, but you can order through our website or call up the store at 435-619-8200 to special order. And I'll be sending that email. And thanks again, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you for being collected here together. Really glad you all came.